Oh my God, you do have a crush on him.
What, Mom? Why shouldn't I like him? When I'm with him, he makes me happy. And he needs me.
Why does Meg Griffin love? Truth is, it depends. Hi, I'm Kitty Monk, and I'm here to talk to you about Family Guy. Or more specifically, Meg Griffin. Shut up, Meg. Now, there were a million topics I could have chosen for Meg. Why is she the show's punching bag? Why did she switch voice actors? Why does she sound like Jackie from that 70s show? Not much like South Park, a show I'm still reviewing. Family Guy provides the opportunity for multiple videos. And on that note, I thought I would take a look at Meg and many of her destructive love interests. So, let's discuss. In the later seasons, and even in the earlier seasons, Meg became known for her many risky behaviors. For better or for worse, though usually for worse because this is Family Guy. Part of me likes to justify flanderization, so I usually tell myself this is in response to how the family treated her. She can't do much to them because nothing changes anyhow. So instead, she turns those emotions inward. Why is this important? Because you can very well see Meg's mental state reflected in the view of men she loves. She doesn't get any love at home, so she makes up for it by having destructive romances, which are almost always one-sided. And this began all the way back in the earlier seasons. First off, we have the more normal partners, Neil Goldman and Kevin Swanson. Let's start with Kevin. From the day the Swansons moved to Quahog, Meg had a huge crush on Kevin. During his first appearance, she tried her hardest to have a conversation with him, only to fail for one reason or another.
I've admired you in the garden from afar. Will you go out with me?
I'd love to.
Oh, he's gay.
Get out of here, you mouth breather!
However, despite this, they never really became an item, just really good friends. And I feel it's important to point this out. Kevin is the boy next door, both literally and figuratively. Normally, with the boy next door, they're lacking in personality. They're just nice and kinda there and meant to give the main character somebody to obsess over. They're like Ken, but to a teenage girl, they don't care about all that stuff. No personality. That makes it easier for them to slide into their daydreams. I will admit their whole bond is kinda cute.
I'm into garbage, fish, Blur. My parents don't like me listening to that stuff, but I do anyway, because I am not a robot! I also like Radiohead.
However, the show gradually began to phase out Kevin, I don't know why, eventually writing him off in the episode Steroids, meaning it left Neil Goldman as the only other potential love interest for Meg, a prospect she really disliked. I hate to say it, but ironically, Neil is probably the safest candidate for Meg's hand out of everyone in this video. Kevin, I don't count because of how the later seasons made fun of him for having a disability the same way they do with his father. Like, haha, he's a war veteran, and he also voices Steve. Neil Goldman is another boy to come out of Meg's normal phase, albeit when the show started to make the transition from normal to punching bag. Now, I was a girl in high school. I know it's hard to believe. And when I was in high school, I realized that for many girls, you remember these two guys. The one you have a massive crush on, but who's super out of your league, either because you don't think he would notice you, or he doesn't notice your signs, or even that he's too high on the social pecking order. And then there's the second boy, the one who likes you, but you don't like him. In my experience, it's because he's a creep. Neil is the latter. Likely because he sounds like Chris if Chris started wearing braces.
That's Lubin's. Now that's Shatner, but when I freeze frame, you can clearly see Lubin's coffee cup sitting on that rock.
Sweet Valley Thruthers. Granted, there were a few times Meg had an attraction to Neil, but during both of these instances, it did not last very long. The first was in the kiss scene around the world, where Meg and Neil became interns for Tom Tucker. During this time, out of pure desperation, Meg and Neil had their first kiss, even though they shared no romantic feelings.
It's not too late, Meg. I'm here for you.
Unfortunately, Neil is kinda like Roger when Roger loved Haley, and he now thinks he and Meg are serious AF, and he broadcasts it to everybody.
This is where we cease to be Meg and Neil and begin life anew as Meal.
Oh my god, he put it on TV.
Meg, this is why you don't get on the bad side of an AV kid. I was that kid. It's not until Meg says, in no uncertain terms, after Neil tries to commit not alive, that she doesn't like him, that he finally gets it.
But I was never really planning to jump.
Wasn't gonna jump? You're a phony! Hey everybody! This guy's a great big phony!
The second Neil episode was 8 Simple Rules for Buying My Teenage Daughter. Coincidentally, the title is also 8 words. Neil realizes he'll never get together with Meg and starts looking at other ladies. Okay, and he dates a girl that would actually be pretty good for him, Cecilia.
Cecilia thinks my psoriasis is sexy.
I can't believe he's over me.
I can't believe I'm out 34 grand.
According to the wiki, her name is spelled with no E. Good to know. Peter tries to sell Meg to the Goldmans to cover his tab at the pharmacy, because it's $34,000. Meg objects until she sees Neil with Cecilia and gets jealous.
Neil and I are celebrating our 2-week anniversary. Oh, it seems like only yesterday he was just a stranger videotaping me through the window.
Big deal.
Megan, your acceptance letter from Jelly School is in the mail. Part of me wonders if Neil intentionally did this. Ironically, in any other show, I'd argue that Neil and Meg would probably get together full-time, one day. Maybe even as a series finale type deal. They're both nerds, outcasts, and Neil's that one kid who, in cartoons, just has too big a crush, but would in real life get a restraining order. Weird this hasn't come up in later seasons, just saying. Anyhow, you have to remember that in these episodes, Meg was just a normal teenager. These relationships made sense. Well, here comes Adam West. Adam West provides a pretty weird transition for Meg. From normal, healthy relationships to full-on, get this girl therapy, please. During the episode, Deep Throats, Meg becomes an intern for Mayor West. And believe me, the test to become his intern was difficult AF.
Mosquito.
Bite.
Bite.
Mosquito.
Bite.
Mosquito.
Aha! Very good. You are a worthy opponent indeed.
Huh. It was surprisingly easier than that time she tried to interview him. Meg is enjoying her time as an intern. The work's not hard, and Mayor West treats her pretty well. While this is going on, Brian is driving a taxi. Thank you very much. And he is doing an awful job at it.
I should really pick up that milk now before I forget.
You son of a...
I would never use Brian's taxi. The only rideshare I trust is HandyCar. One day, Brian stops at Carl's store to pick up a few things. And despite being in there for like 30 seconds, he gets a ticket worth $400.
What the hell? $400? My God, this is a bigger ripoff than Peter's Sounds of the Rainforest CD.
Okay, I hate to say it, actually I don't, but I don't like Brian in this episode. Because the ticket, this becomes Brian's main reason for hating Mayor West. Why? It's Brian's fault he got the ticket for parking in a spot he wasn't supposed to. Of course he got in trouble for it. It doesn't matter if he was only in there for a few minutes. Oh, I forgot it was the first of the month, and I didn't pay my electric bill, and they turned off my power. Clearly it's a conspiracy from the powers that be. Mayor Baraka, why? To Brian, it's Mayor West's fault that he got in trouble.
Hey, Meg, I need to see the mayor about this $400 parking ticket.
Brian, you can't just barge in here. You have to make an appointment.
Yes, Brian, because he compelled you with his creepy Klaus Michelson powers to park in that spot. Just for the fun of it. And nobody, not even the episode, ever calls him out on it. Like, no offense, Brian. You don't think of fighting the ticket yourself before you try to take Mayor West down a peg? Or at least find out why the ticket was so expensive? I mean, come on, your next door neighbor's a cop. It's like we were missing a scene to foreshadow Brian hating Mayor West. Maybe Brian watches the news and Mayor West wants to build another Diggum statue, and for that he's increasing the parking tickets. dig them. Brian could be like, ugh, what a crook. Or be like, that's not gonna do anything. And then he could get the ticket. Then, even though it would kind of be Brian's fault, the grievance would make more sense.
Somebody's got to stand up and prove to this town that he's a crook. And it looks like it has to be me.
Mayor West is a card and he needs to be dealt with. Brian wants to prove Mayor West is evil for being a politician and goes to a parking garage to talk to an anonymous source named Deep Throat. That explains the title. Also, he's Kermit.
Thank you for coming, Deep Throat.
You'll understand if I don't come out from the shadows. My identity will be safest if you never see my face.
Is he called that because a puppet needs a deep throat for the puppeteer to control him? Because if that's true, it's really smart. Kermit says that Mayor West hasn't been home for 3 nights.
Somebody talked! No one is safe! I'm getting out of here! Yay! What's his appeal?
He's funny, and he's a symbol of perseverance and whimsy when it comes to your dreams, Dewey. Brian starts to spy on Mayor West by flattering Meg, pretending to apologize.
Oh, you guys are so sweet. Mwah. Hey, can you guys hold on a sec? I gotta get this to Helen in accounting.
Okay, bye.
No offense, Meg, but the only wrong thing Stewie really did this episode was blindly follow Brian. Why can't you torture the dog instead?
I'm really having a great time tonight, Brian.
Ew, I did not mean like that. Brian goes through Mayor West's files and finds his date book.
Aha, the mayor's date book. This should tell us what we want to know.
Really? People say date book? I thought it was called a planner. With the most important info being a motel room he's staying at each night. Kermit was right. They go there and discover that rather than, trafficking children or being guilty of insider trading, Mayor West is watching TV in a place that isn't his home. How evil.
Well, what do you see?
I see a grown man enjoying cartoons.
You're one to talk. You're such a Velma, Brian. Velma was made for people like you. And also, Mayor West is having an affair with Meg. I should have mentioned that.
Oh my God, it's Meg! What? Meg and Adam West? Ew! Oh, sorry.
Ew. Not only because of the power dynamics or how it reflects real-world politics at the time, looking at Gary Condit or Bill Clinton, or even how Mayor West mentally acts like a child, so he probably finds nothing wrong with it, but when you watch this episode with the knowledge that later in the series he marries Lois's sister and becomes Meg's uncle, ew, that makes for an awful Thanksgiving when Kevin Swanson isn't there to break the tension. Brian attempts to get taped evidence of Mayor West and Meg because pictures don't work, which I think he might have realized this because later he does get a picture of the two together. Meg comes home one night and is confronted by Brian, sitting in a chair in the dark like a jealous housewife. Honestly, this part's kind of funny, I like it.
Another late night, huh?
Yeah, Mayor West keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah, I noticed.
Rather than warn her before telling her parents, he tells Meg he knows about Mayor West and he's going to the press with the knowledge he has. Meg, angered, attempts to warn Mayor West, who breaks up with her to keep from ruining her life.
You're just a sweet young lady with her whole life ahead of her. This story could ruin your future, and I can't let that happen.
Oh, okay then. Well, it's a surprising level of maturity, coming from the guy who insisted all caskets were to be lined with cement to prevent the zombie apocalypse. Moved, Brian decides not to go to the press and protects Meg's reputation.
I don't think I'll be needing it anymore. I got so caught up in taking down Mayor West that I just lost sight of right and wrong.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
But does he pay the parking ticket is my main question. What's important to note is this episode aired during season 4, when Family Guy came back from the dead, and when Meg started to become the family punching bag. By this point, Meg had already started to be bullied and receiving little support from the people around her.
Brian's the new Meg! Brian's the new Meg!
Yeah, you're the new me!
Shut up, Meg.
No wonder she gravitated towards Mayor West, an older figure who made her feel needed and respected. And as we'll see later on with Joe, maybe what Meg was really feeling for him was a paternal or uncle type of love. But being love-starved and confused, she mistook it as a romantic connection and just rolled with it. However, these are only prologues. Let's not forget, Meg's relationships would become more dangerous from here on out. And ironically, all of that started with Brian. In Barely Legal, Meg wants to go to the school dance, but can't find anybody willing to go with.
I was wondering if you'd like to go with me.
Hang on. I'd love to go, Meg, but I have to go to my little brother's funeral that night.
Okay. No wonder Meg wanted to go up to her room and eat peanuts. Out of pity, Brian says that he'll take her, which he treats as an annoying chore, spending the whole evening getting pee in his face drunk, which he should be used to, he's a dog. Remember Snuffles? Sorry, Snowball? During the dance, he also does something I'm sure Meg views as him emphasizing with her.
Man, I gotta tell you, I can see why you'd be insecure, Meg. Some of these chicks are unbelievable.
Eventually, Connie D'Amico and her posse come over and humiliate Meg. This time, Brian has her back.
But now you can't stand to look at yourself in the mirror, so you pick on Meg to avoid the inevitable realization that once your body's used up by age 19, you're gonna be a worn-out, chalky-skinned burlap sack.
Oh damn, you go dog. Too bad he also kisses Meg, which is a huge no-no, drunk or not.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Look, I was drinking.
Oh, what a shock.
Thank you, Lois. But the point is, in this instance, it was still an accident. Let me make it very clear. He felt nothing for her. Unfortunately, Meg now thinks that Brian is her boyfriend, even introducing him to her friends as such. Solely because of the kiss and how he stood up to Connie D'Amico for her.
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy, huh? Who's a good boy?
Me.
Oh, who's a good boy?
Seriously, Meg is like a reverse Dulcinea. She loves people after meeting them for 2 seconds, and they don't love her back. Meg's attraction proves to be too much for Brian, especially after she feeds him a pie, with her own hair in it.
My hair is in the pie, Brian. And now it's inside of you. Part of me is inside of you, Brian.
Well, Meg, you know he's gonna have to use the bathroom at one point. Then he won't be able to feel you inside him. Oh, what are you gonna do then? Make him more pie? Likely remembering deep throats, he lets Meg down easy.
Meg, the fact is, you and I are friends, and that's the way it needs to stay. Besides, I have a girlfriend. I'm dating Jillian.
Oh yeah, that's right, Jillian. Wonder how Meg was justifying that. So Brian once again tries to tell her, in no uncertain terms, that he doesn't love her. This time he uses a deaf interpreter to aid in the process.
We're not boyfriend and girlfriend.
We're not boyfriend and girlfriend. I will never be attracted to you.
Meg doesn't want to be ignored while also ignoring all of Brian's pleas, and decides to kidnap him, and take him to a hotel to do with him as she pleases.
We're gonna have fun tonight. Good, old-fashioned, all-American fun.
Meg, sweetie, I know you're desperate, but you're not coming off that great. Besides, sitting in that chair, in that one position, but with all that tape and his fur, that would not be comfortable. Good thing Chris was a witness.
Is it bad if I saw Meg tie up Brian last night?
Chris, why didn't you say anything?
I dropped the ball. I'm sorry. I have just been buried in paperwork.
You know, I do think it's funny how in a simulation, when the family was tied to a bunch of chairs and Chris wasn't, but he did not think to tell anybody. Maybe Stewie knew from this episode that Chris would not be the kind of person to turn to during an emergency, so that's how he programmed it. I don't know. And they're lucky that Meg wants to take a while.
A while?
Yeah, a while.
You mean a while?
A while.
A while.
A while.
A while.
A while.
A while.
Brian, you're acting weird.
Am I saying that right? The Griffins track down Meg and Brian, and they try to tell her that she's confused, and she should let Brian go. But their pleas fall on deaf ears. I don't know if that's a joke or not, considering that moment from earlier. Take it as you will. Thankfully, a talk from Quagmire sets Meg on the straight and narrow, and shows her that she has her whole life ahead of her, and she doesn't need to be with a man to feel complete.
There's no reason to grow up too fast, but you've got all the time in the world and a lot of wonderful experiences ahead of you.
Kinda sweet. It sucks this lesson did not stick. As we see, Meg's lack of boundaries comes from a deep place of insecurity. Any male who shows her the tiniest bit of attention, she'll sink her teeth in and never let go. Any form of abandonment, real or imagined, is something she can't possibly fathom. It doesn't matter who it is. I've even heard some people try to diagnose Meg with BPD, borderline personality disorder, because of how she deals with romance. I'm curious, how accurate would that be? Too bad there was a sequel episode that had Meg develop a crush on another older gentleman who showed her an ounce of attention. And as it's in the later seasons, it's arguably creepier than here. Presenting the hand that rocks the wheelchair. Bonnie is going out of town to take care of her father and needs somebody to watch Joe. And Lois doesn't want to do it, so the task falls to Meg. First off, I like how Lois is able to get Meg to do it by flattering her.
And Bonnie said you were very pretty.
But how did that come up?
And I said Rachel Maddow.
Who's Rachel Maddow?
A model.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought she was a journalist. Meg goes to take care of Joe and finds that, kinda like Adam West, the work isn't all that hard. She pretty much just has to make sure he and Susie don't die, which obviously doesn't happen. One morning, after helping Joe with his exercises, Meg finds that she missed the bus, and Joe decides to help her by driving her to school. The ride is pretty awkward.
That Puerto Rican street gang give you any trouble on your way home from school?
What Puerto Rican street gang?
You're welcome.
Obligatory Puerto Rican joke to remind viewers that I myself am both Puerto Rican and strange and unusual. Afterwards, Joe drops Meg off in front of the school.
Most times people just drop me off a block away so they don't have to be seen with me.
I don't mind being seen with you.
You don't?
Of course not.
Wow.
And with little prompting, Meg now thinks that Joe is her boyfriend.
Hey, who's that? Your boyfriend?
Yeah, that's my boyfriend.
For me, what makes this episode weirder than barely legal is how Meg behaves with Joe compared to Brian. With Brian, she was mostly just acting the way she thinks a teenager is meant to around a significant other. Taking him to the mall, holding his hand, all that good stuff. It wasn't until Brian told her that she was making him uncomfortable that she started to go crazy. And you at least had the excuse that he kissed her. Which again, it was wrong, but to a kid like Meg, that's one of the most romantic gestures possible. With Joe, it comes down to the fact he did her a favor he'd probably do for anybody else. And it's because of this super quick favor that Meg's behavior starts to digress. She starts to dress like Bonnie, do more favors for Joe just to show how nice she is, and calls him little pet names, including his first name.
If he doesn't say anything about me calling him Joe, that means we're truly in love.
It's kinda weird, but I'll just let it slide. She's got nothing going on. Besides, what harm could it do?
In a sense, it's like she wants to replace Bonnie. If she could tear off Bonnie's skin and drape it all over her body and hold said skin up with a chip clip, she definitely would. You might think I'm exaggerating and quoting American Dad, but trust me, Meg would definitely do this. Bonnie tells Meg that she's coming home early and to tell Joe. Instead, Meg lies to Joe and drives all the way to the airport where Bonnie is supposed to be, which basically means she drove all night after stealing Joe's car, just so she could plant a gun in Bonnie's luggage and get her arrested. That way, she could have Joe all to herself.
Ma'am, this bag contains a concealed weapon. I'm gonna have to place you under arrest.
Oh my goodness, how did that get in there?
That's dedication, and that's insane. For helping him and Susie, Joe surprises Meg by taking her out to dinner. Again, it's a super platonic dinner that means nothing. This is where Meg goes the craziest. She acts like her and Joe are already married, and she pulls a Serena Joy on Susie. Granted, we all know that Susie is just one of those avatars that Avery Bullock controls per virtual insanity, so who knows. Joe goes to Peter and Lois and tries to warn them about Meg.
I remember when Brian had a similar difficulty with Meg. Maybe she's prone to quick and severe infatuation.
Thank you, Joe, for providing the pieces to my video, 28 pages into my script. Lois tries to tell Meg she's mistaking friendly connection for romantic intent.
You're taking care of him and you're feeling a closeness that you're misinterpreting as a romantic connection. But think about it, Meg. You two have nothing in common.
But Meg refuses to listen and tries to make herself more like Joe.
I made us the same, Joe. We're exactly alike, you and I. Now we can be together.
Meg survives this. This creepy streak continues in Friends Without Benefits, and it's probably Meg's worst episode ever. This time she falls in love with a jock named Kent. Wait, his name is Kent? Like the Duke of Kent?
Yes! I can't believe it! Oh my god! I'm going out on a date with Kent, last name.
You know, I've always wondered about this joke. Is Kent's last name really last name the same way mine is Monk? Or is it a sign that Meg was effectively loving a shadow and never bothered to learn his last name? Knowing Family Guy, it's probably either or. It sucks that Kent can never be with Meg because he's gay. After finding out, Meg tries everything to change him.
Well, guess what?
That's my back! Hook up with me! Come on! We can make this work!
Meg, please stop. Things get worse when she learns that he's actually in love with Chris.
Look, I really like you as a friend, but to be honest, I like Chris.
What?
Makes sense. Appearances aside, he's got a great personality. And rather than just ignoring it and letting it go, because Chris obviously doesn't like Kent.
Forget it, Meg. I can't just do stuff with another guy. I'm not Derek Jeter. I like girls.
Meg does the worst thing during this entire video, if not the entire show. She goes to Quagmire to ask him for roofies with the same tone and inflection as asking him for a cup of sugar.
Anyone special these days?
Yay, obviously, right?
Right, of course, yeah. Okay, well, listen, good luck with everything, and call me if you get arrested.
I will. Thanks.
And let me explain exactly what she does very slowly. She puts the roofies in Kool-Aid. She wants to give the Kool-Aid roofie to Chris because she wants Ken to sleep with Chris while Chris is unconscious, which is rape because Chris cannot consent in any meaningful way. And while Chris is unconscious, he can tell her what being with Kent was like.
What? What is wrong with you?
And to make matters worse, during this whole staged encounter, she makes it clear to Kent that Chris wants to do it with him, he's just a little nervous. So he's gonna pretend to be asleep, and Kent is cool with this.
So he's gonna need to pretend to be asleep while it's happening.
Oh, he's a snooze juicer. Okay.
And when Meg finds out, she's upset, Kent wants nothing to do with her, and Chris is offended.
You're a complete psycho!
What? This entire episode, it makes no sense.
That does not make sense!
I know, Johnny Cochran, I know. On any front, it makes no sense. This is probably the one time I don't feel bad for Meg. It's one thing to like Ken even after he doesn't like her, because you can't really control how you feel, but you can control your actions. Like, I don't even know what to say. At least with the previous entries, ignoring Neil, she thought they liked her because they did something nice for her. I could understand her actions in those episodes, whether or not she went crazy and where she was coming from. Here, it makes no sense. Look, I don't want to keep repeating myself, so let's move on. Finally, I want to take a look at one of the most infamous, in a good way, Luke from Dial Meg for Murder. Honestly, I love this episode, I just have a few problems with it pacing-wise. The family goes to the rodeo to support Peter. Whole can of worms there, breeding bull and all, just to show you how mistreated Meg is by the whole family family, let me play you this clip of Peter using her to train for the rodeo.
What the hell? That there's my steer, Griffin.
Wait, Mayor West, I thought you did a good thing. Or was it a sign of continuity? I'm not sure. At the rodeo, Brian meets the editor for Teen People, who is trying to find somebody to write an article on the average teenage girl. Good thing Brian knows an average teenage girl. Still, rather than just plain old interview Meg and use that for the article, he decides for some reason to basically stalk her. Like a frickin' creep. Even Stewie is appalled.
You know, Brian, just because you're writing a profile on teenage girls, it doesn't mean you have to be a creepy stalker and follow Meg around all day.
It's called research, Stewie. I'm just being thorough.
While following Meg, he and Stewie discover that she's dating a prison inmate named Luke.
Hi, Meg.
Hi, Luke.
Now this is what the episode should have been about. Look, I know Family Guy loves to copy The Simpsons, where Act 1 is devoted to a plot line that never really comes up. But Meg dating Luke, I wish that got more focus. As it turns out, Meg met Luke through a prison pen pal project at school.
We had a pen pal project at school, and when it was over, Luke and I just kind of kept writing to each other.
Wait, what teacher agreed to let Meg write to prisoners? Meg, did you not watch that episode of King of the Hill with Peggy and Wes Archer? Look, no offense, I'm not saying everybody behind bars is a monster or we should deny them rights because they stole a loaf of bread. But Meg is 17, she doesn't have good judgment, she's impressionable, and she has no way of verifying any of the information Luke is saying.
He's in prison for a reason. He broke the law.
He robbed a convenience store to pay for medication for his mom.
Oh, I'm sure he gave you a very convincing sob story.
See? Upon finding out the truth, Brian goes to her parents.
I'm sorry, Meg. I had to tell them.
Don't give him crap for this, Meg. He did exactly the right thing by coming to us.
Okay, I both like this and don't like this. I do agree that Meg should not be talking to Luke because if you ignore the convict status, there's a huge age gap. But kinda like Deep Throats, Brian found out through spying. He should have went to Meg first and said, if you don't break up with Luke, then I'm gonna go to Peter and Lois and tell the warden. Obviously, Lois and Peter tell Meg she's not allowed to see Luke.
But Mom, I love him!
It stops now, Meg.
Your mother's right, Meg. You gotta be careful who you get involved with romantically.
Too bad they did not tell Luke who broke out of prison to go see Meg.
What are you doing here?
I escaped, Meg. I escaped because I just couldn't bear another second away from you.
See? Imagine if Luke was actually dangerous. All the things he could do to the Griffins. Meg decides to hide Luke in her room, timing of which depends on how you're watching the episode. On TV and Hulu, it's for all of 30 seconds. In the DVD version, I was surprised to learn it was for a good long while, maybe for like a day or two. At one point, she even stole dinner from downstairs to go bring to Luke. Peter calls Joe, and because Luke is stupid enough to run downhill while being chased by a wheelchair-bound police officer,
No, Luke! Don't run downhill!
he gets arrested. Serves him right. And Meg is sent to prison for harboring a fugitive.
You're under arrest for harboring an escaped convict.
Oh, well, that's only fair because after all, I did hide him from the— What?
Her sentence served, Meg comes home.
And I'm sure she'll be heartened to see our faces.
I'm home.
What's important to note is Luke never appears from this point forward. I think he's mentioned like once by Brian.
What happened to the girl we used to know? The one that Luke fell in love with? The one he's expecting to see when he steps out of that prison in 40 years?
I don't care about Luke.
And I think this is important. After May gets out of prison, she goes crazy. And it's in a good way, sort of.
Now who's the funniest?
I know my way around a joke.
For God's sake, Dad, have some humility. It'll save your life.
To me, this was another time her family made things worse for her. Meg thought she loved Luke in spite of his bad past and his bad faults. She was prepared to wait for him, however long that would be.
Looks like I'm gonna be in here another 3 years.
Oh, Luke.
Oh, I don't expect you to wait for me, Meg.
No, I will, Luke. If it takes 10 years or 20 years, I will be here when you get out.
And she trusted him. But like usual, the Griffins had to come and take away all she held dear, just to make her miserable. No wonder she snapped. It was only when Brian, who started this whole mess, at the end of the episode, showed he cared about her by reading her the article he wrote.
In this sense, Meg Griffin is not the typical American girl. She is far sweeter and kinder than that. Oh my God, that is so nice, Brian.
Well, that's Meg and her many, many suitors. Meg is a teenager, and in many ways has the insecurities and tribulations that come with that age group. Too bad Megatron lives in the world of Family Guy. Why does Meg Griffin love, you ask? Because she knows no other way. It's sad, really. Anyhow, bye!
Can I give you a lift home? My cab's right outside.